The alarm clock showed 4:07 a.m. when Evelyn's eyes snapped open. Not because the alarm had gone off, she couldn't afford one that worked properly, but because her body had learned to wake at this hour after 6 years of the same routine. The basement room was pitch black, no windows to let in even the faintest hint of dawn, just four concrete walls, a narrow bed with sheets she'd washed so many times they'd turned gray, and a single lamp on a wooden crate that served as her nightstand. She reached for the lamp switch, and pale yellow light flooded the small space. Her eyes went immediately to the photograph taped to the wall above her bed, a woman with Evelyn's same honey brown hair and gentle smile, frozen in time at 32 years old. Rose Chen, beloved wife and mother. Gone 15 years now, but still the first thing Evelyn looked at every morning. "Good morning, Mom," she whispered, pressing her fingers to her lips and then to the photograph, a ritual she'd performed every day since she was 10 years old. "Watch over me today, okay?" She swung her legs over the side of the bed and felt the cold concrete through her thin socks. The heating system in this basement had broken 3 winters ago, and Harold, her father, had never fixed it. "It's not like anyone important sleeps down there," Miranda had said when Evelyn brought it up, and that had been the end of that conversation. Evelyn pulled on her work clothes in the semi-darkness, a plain white blouse, black pants, comfortable shoes for standing all day. Before heading upstairs, she paused at the small mirror hanging on the back of her door and looked at the silver ring on her right hand. It was simple, slightly tarnished, with an inscription on the inside that she knew by heart, even though she couldn't see it in this light. "Your worth is not defined by what others think of you." Her mother's last gift, her only inheritance. The kitchen was silent when she reached it, the house still sleeping. But Evelyn's morning had already begun. She pulled out ingredients for breakfast. Miranda's specific organic eggs from the specialty store, Jessica's gluten-free toast that cost $12 a loaf, Harold's black coffee with exactly 1.5 sugars. She knew their preferences better than she knew her own, because her own preferences had never mattered in this house. While the coffee brewed, she moved to the laundry room where Jessica's dress hung, the one her stepsister would wear to today's charity luncheon. It needed pressing, steaming, careful attention to every fold. Evelyn worked silently, methodically, her hands moving through motions they'd performed thousands of times before. At 5:45 a.m., with breakfast prepared and Jessica's dress hanging perfectly in her closet, Evelyn slipped out the back door into the gray Brooklyn morning. The subway would take her to Golden Lily Bakery in Park Slope, where Mrs. Lily Chen, no relation to Evelyn's mother, just a beautiful coincidence, would be waiting with flour on her apron and a warm smile that felt more like home than the house Evelyn had just left. Golden Lily Bakery smelled like heaven at 6 o'clock in the morning, butter melting into layers of croissant dough, cinnamon and sugar crystallizing on freshly glazed rolls, coffee brewing in the ancient percolator that Mrs. Lily refused to replace because it adds character to the taste. "Good morning, my girl," Mrs. Lily called out as Evelyn pushed through the back door. The elderly Chinese woman was already wrist-deep in bread dough, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "You're 3 minutes late. The yeast waited for you." Evelyn couldn't help but smile, the first genuine smile of her day. The subway was delayed again. Signal problems at Atlantic Avenue. "Oomph, that subway has had signal problems since before you were born. One day it will figure itself out." Mrs. Lily gestured with a flour-dusted hand. Come, come, the cinnamon rolls need their second rise. And I want to teach you a new technique for the honey glaze." This was Evelyn's sanctuary. For 6 years, ever since she'd walked into this bakery as a nervous 22-year-old, looking for any job that would give her an excuse to leave the house, Mrs. Lily had treated her like family, like the daughter she'd never had. Here, Evelyn wasn't the unwanted stepdaughter living in a basement. Here, she was a baker with golden hands, as Mrs. Lily often said, someone with talent and potential and worth. "Mrs. Lily," Evelyn said as she tied on her apron, "do you remember what you told me my first week here, when I burnt an entire batch of croissants and cried in the storage room?" The older woman laughed, a warm sound that filled the kitchen. "I told you that every great baker has burnt something. That's how we learn." "Why?" Evelyn asked softly. "I've been thinking about it lately, about learning, about whether some lessons are worth the pain." Mrs. Lily paused her kneading and looked at Evelyn with those sharp, knowing eyes that seemed to see everything. "Is something wrong at home?" Evelyn hesitated. She'd never told Mrs. Lilly the full truth about her living situation. The basement room, the unpaid labor, the way Miranda and Jessica treated her like staff rather than family. Some things were too humiliating to put into words. "Just tired," she said finally. "You know how it is." Mrs. Lilly didn't look convinced, but she nodded and returned to her dough. "You know, Evelyn, one day you'll have your own bakery. I see it in you, the passion, the skill, the heart. And when that day comes, you'll understand that all the hard times were just ingredients in your recipe. Bitter ones, maybe, but necessary." Evelyn wanted to believe her. She desperately wanted to believe that there was something more waiting for her beyond the basement room and the thankless mornings and the constant reminder that she was, in Miranda's words, just the help with a family connection. But some mornings, belief was harder than kneading bread dough. The afternoon rain came without warning, the kind of sudden New York downpour that sends people scrambling for cover and ruins carefully planned outfits. By 4 o'clock, the bakery had emptied of customers, and Evelyn was preparing to close up early. That's when he walked in. The bell above the door chimed, and a man stumbled through, absolutely soaked. Water dripped from his gray hoodie, his jeans were plastered to his legs, and his dark hair was matted to his forehead. He looked, Evelyn thought, like a college student who'd gotten caught in a thunderstorm on his way to class. Or maybe a startup employee working late hours and forgetting to check the weather. "We're about to close," Evelyn said, then immediately felt guilty. The man was shivering, his hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. "But I can get you something warm first. Coffee? Tea?" He looked up, and Evelyn caught her first glimpse of his eyes, gray-green and surprisingly sharp for someone who looked so bedraggled. "Coffee would be great. Black." He glanced at the display case, droplets falling from his hair onto the floor. "What's that?" "Cinnamon rolls, Mrs. Lilly's specialty. They're still warm." "I'll take one." Evelyn poured the coffee and selected the best roll from the batch, the one with the most swirl, the most glaze. As she set them on the counter, she noticed the man was still trembling. "Wait here a second," she said, and disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she was carrying one of the clean towels they use for drying equipment. "Here, you need to dry off or you'll catch pneumonia." The man stared at this towel like she'd handed him something precious. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to, but your hair is dripping into your coffee, and that seems counterproductive." A small smile crossed his face as he accepted the towel. "Thank you, that's really kind of you." "It's just a towel." "It's not the towel." He began drying his hair, movements slow and almost confused, as if kindness was a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "It's been a while since someone did something like this without expecting anything in return." Evelyn shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gratitude. "That'll be $3 for the coffee." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, nicer than she'd expected, given his casual clothes, and extracted a $100 bill. "Keep the change, call it a tip for the towel." "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because you're soaking wet in the middle of a rainstorm, and you look like you could use that money more than I could. The subway fare alone is going to cost you." Evelyn pushed the bill back toward him. $3, that's all I need." The man studied her face for a long moment. His eyes, Evelyn noticed, weren't just sharp. They were searching, as if he was looking for something specific and hadn't expected to find it. "What's your name?" he asked. "Evelyn." "Evelyn." He repeated it like he was memorizing the sound. "I'm Nate." "Nice to meet you, Nate." She finally took the $3 he offered. "Now dry off and eat your cinnamon roll before it gets cold. You'll miss the glaze." As he ate, they talked, nothing profound, just the kind of small conversation that happens between strangers in a warm bakery while rain pounds against the windows. He asked about how long she'd been working there, and she told him 6 years. She asked what he did for work, and he said investments, vague enough to mean anything from Wall Street to cryptocurrency to unemployment. When he finished his roll, he stood and handed her back the towel. "Thank you, Evelyn. Really thank you." "Thank Mrs. Lilly. She's the one who made the recipe." "I'm not thanking you for the cinnamon roll." He paused at the door, rain still sheeting down outside. "I'm thanking you for treating me like I was just some guy who needed to warm up. That sounds like nothing, but it's not, trust me." Before Evelyn could ask what he meant, he pulled his hood up and walked back into the storm. She found herself standing at the window, watching him disappear into the gray afternoon, wondering why a stranger's gratitude had felt so heavy. It wasn't until she was locking up 20 minutes later that she realized something had fallen on the floor near where Nate had been standing, her mother's ring. The clasp must have loosened when she handed him the towel. The old silver was wearing thin, and she'd been meaning to get it fixed for months. Evelyn's heart seized in her chest as she dropped to her knees, frantically searching. There, half under the counter, glinting in the dim light. She snatched it up and pressed it to her lips, nearly crying with relief. As she slipped it back onto her finger, she noticed something she'd missed when she picked it up. The ring had landed face up, the inscription visible. Your worth is not defined by what others think of you. The same words her mother had whispered to her in the hospital room 15 years ago. The same words she repeated to herself every morning in the basement. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that a man named Nate had seen those words too, had read them in the brief moment when the ring lay in his palm before he returned it to her, had felt something crack open in his chest at the sight of this woman, this stranger who carried her mother's love inscribed on her hand and refused $100 tips from people she thought needed the money more than she did. What she didn't know was that Nate wasn't Nate. And in 2 weeks, her life would be shattered because of that lie. The living room of the Chen residence felt different tonight. Colder somehow, more formal. Evelyn stood in the doorway, summoned from her basement room by a text from Harold that simply read, "Come upstairs, important family meeting." Miranda sat on the cream-colored sofa, legs crossed, a glass of white wine in her manicured hand. Her face wore the expression Evelyn had learned to dread, the one that meant she'd figured out a way to benefit herself at someone else's expense. Jessica was beside her, phone in hand as usual, barely looking up when Evelyn entered. And Harold, Evelyn's father, the man who was supposed to protect her, sat in the armchair across from them, his face a mask of carefully constructed concern that didn't quite hide the guilt in his eyes. "Sit down, Evelyn," Miranda said, not an invitation, a command. Evelyn sat on the edge of the remaining chair, her hands folded in her lap. Her thumb found her mother's ring and traced the familiar band, seeking comfort in the metal's cool surface. "We need to discuss the family's financial situation," Harold began, his voice thin. There's been a problem." "What kind of problem?" Miranda set down her wine glass with a sharp click. "We're in debt, Evelyn. $5 million of debt. Your father made some bad investments, and now the bank is threatening to take the house. He could go to prison for fraud." Evelyn's stomach dropped. $5 million? How is that? "It doesn't matter how it happened," Miranda cut her off. "What matters is that there's a solution, but it requires your cooperation." The way she said cooperation made Evelyn's skin crawl. "What kind of solution?" Miranda exchanged a glance with Jessica, a quick, conspiratorial look that Evelyn caught but couldn't interpret. "There's a businessman, very wealthy, very private. He's looking for a companion, a woman to attend social events with him for 12 months, act as his girlfriend in public. No physical obligations," she added quickly, as if that made it better. "Just appearances. The compensation is $5 million. The words hit Evelyn like physical blows. "Companion, attend social events, act as his girlfriend, $5 million. You're asking me to sell myself. Don't be so dramatic." Jessica finally looked up from her phone, her lip curling with disdain. "It's basically a job. Show up, look pretty, don't embarrass yourself. Even you could manage that." "This is insane." Evelyn turned to her father. "Dad, you can't actually be considering this." Harold wouldn't meet her eyes, his hands twisting in his lap over and over like he was trying to wring out his own guilt. "It's only for a year, sweetheart, and the family needs—" "Don't call me that!" Evelyn's voice cracked. "Don't you dare call me sweetheart while you're sitting there asking me to—" "You're being selfish." Miranda's tone hardened. "Everything you have is because of this family, the roof over your head, the food in your stomach. We took you in when your mother died. We raised you. You put me in a basement and treated me like a servant. And yet you're still here, aren't you?" Miranda leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Because you have nowhere else to go. No money, no education beyond high school. Nothing but a part-time job at a bakery that barely pays minimum wage. So let's be realistic about your options, shall we?" Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of these people. Not in front of the woman who had systematically stripped away her dignity for 15 years. "What happens if I say no?" Miranda smiled. A thin, cruel expression that Evelyn had seen 100 times before. "Then your father goes to prison. We lose the house and that little bakery you love so much. Mrs. Chen doesn't own the building. Evelyn, the landlord is an associate of mine. It would be a shame if the lease wasn't renewed. The threat landed exactly as intended. Evelyn's blood went cold. Mrs. Lilly, the bakery. The only good thing in her life. You wouldn't. I would do whatever is necessary to protect my family. Miranda's eyes bore into Evelyn's. The question is, will you? Silence stretched across the room. Evelyn looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw a man who had long ago stopped being the father she remembered. The man who had held her hand at her mother's funeral, who had promised to always take care of her, who had slowly retreated year after year until he was just a ghost living in the same house. He couldn't save her. He wouldn't even try. Evelyn's hand went to her mother's ring. She thought about the inscription, about her mother's voice, weak but certain, telling her that her worth wasn't defined by what others thought. But what about what others did to her? What about being backed into a corner with no way out? If I do this, Evelyn said slowly, each word like swallowing broken glass, I want it in writing. After 12 months, I'm gone. I leave this house and you never contact me again. Miranda's smile widened. I think that can be arranged. The law office of Patterson Associates occupied the 47th floor of a glass tower in Manhattan. Evelyn had never been in a building this tall, never ridden an elevator this fast, never seen a reception area that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined. She was wearing her best dress, a simple navy blue piece she bought secondhand 3 years ago for job interviews. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, and she'd applied the only makeup she owned, a touch of mascara and lip gloss that Mrs. Lilly had given her for her birthday. Miranda and Jessica had dressed for the occasion in designer outfits that screamed wealth they didn't actually possess. Evelyn found herself wondering with dark humor if this mysterious businessman would notice the price tag still attached to Jessica's new Hermes bag. Remember, Miranda hissed as they approached the conference room. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't embarrass us. And for God's sake, try to smile. You look like you're going to a funeral. Evelyn said nothing. She felt like she was going to a funeral, her own. A paralegal in a crisp suit opened the conference room door. Mr. Sterling is ready for you. Sterling. The name meant nothing to Evelyn, though clearly it meant something to Miranda, whose sharp intake of breath was audible. They filed into the room, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, a conference table that could seat 20, and 3 lawyers arranged on one side like generals preparing for battle. And at the head of the table, rising to greet them, was Evelyn stopped breathing. It was him, the man from the bakery, the soaking wet stranger who'd eaten a cinnamon roll and thanked her for a towel like she'd given him a kidney. Nate. Only he wasn't Nate. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. His dark hair was styled, not dripping. His posture radiated power and control instead of the vulnerability she'd glimpsed in that rainy afternoon. And the lawyers flanking him treated him with the kind of deference reserved for people who could destroy careers with a phone call. Mr. Sterling, one of the lawyers began, may I present? We've met. His eyes found Evelyn's across the room and she saw the recognition there. And something else. Something almost like relief. Hello, Evelyn. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind her, she heard Miranda's confused whisper. You know him. We met briefly, Sterling said, his gaze never leaving Evelyn's face. At a bakery in Brooklyn. She gave me a towel when I came in from the rain. Jessica made a small sound of disbelief. Miranda's face had gone through several colors, finally settling on a shade of forced pleasantry that meant she was recalculating everything she thought she knew about this situation. What a wonderful coincidence, Miranda's voice had shifted into its most ingratiating tone. My stepdaughter has always been so thoughtful. And Mr. Sterling, may I say what an honor it is to— Sit down, please, Sterling interrupted calmly, but left no room for argument. We have business to discuss. As everyone took their seats, Evelyn found herself directly across from the man she'd thought was named Nate, the man who was apparently Nathaniel Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, one of the wealthiest individuals in New York. The man who had let her refuse a $100 tip because she thought he needed the money more than she did. The humiliation burned in her chest like acid. The lawyers began outlining the terms of the contract. 12 months of public appearances as Sterling's girlfriend. No physical intimacy required. Compensation, $5 million. Evelyn barely heard the words. Her eyes kept drifting back to Sterling's face, looking for some trace of the awkward and grateful stranger from the bakery, looking for an explanation that didn't make her feel like the world's biggest fool. There's one additional clause, one of the lawyers said, sliding a paper toward Evelyn. The compensation will be deposited into an account in Miss Chen's name only. The funds will not be accessible to any family members or third parties. Miranda's face darkened. That wasn't the agreement. The money was supposed to. The agreement was that you would provide a candidate for this arrangement, Sterling interrupted. You've done that. How Miss Chen is compensated is between her and Sterling Industries. For the first time, Evelyn saw cracks in Miranda's composure. Her stepmother's hands had tightened around the arm of her chair, her knuckles white with suppressed fury. I see, Miranda managed. Well, of course, if that's how you prefer to structure it. Sterling turned to Evelyn. Miss Chen, do you have any questions before you sign? 1,000 questions. 1,000,000. But only one that mattered right now. You knew, Evelyn said quietly. At the bakery, you knew who I was. No. Something flickered in his gray-green eyes. I knew nothing about you until a week later when your stepmother's application crossed my desk. I recognized your name, your photo. He paused. Your mother's ring. The ring. He'd seen the inscription when it fell. He'd read her mother's last words to her. And you still wanted to do this, even knowing what this is? I wanted to see if you were the same person when you knew who I was. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Something that sounded almost like hope. When you thought I was just some guy in a wet hoodie, you gave me a towel without being asked. You refused a tip because you thought I needed the money. You treated me like a human being. His gaze held hers. Do you know how rare that is in my world, Miss Chen? Do you have any idea how long it's been since someone saw me instead of my net worth? Evelyn didn't know what to say. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into fog, unable to see what waited below. I'm not a thing, she said finally. I'm not a purchase. Whatever this arrangement is, whatever you're paying for, I want you to know that I'm only doing this because I have no other choice. Not because I want your money, not because I want any of this. I know. Sterling nodded slowly. That's exactly why I signed the contract. The silence stretched across the table. Miranda was practically vibrating with frustration at being excluded from the conversation. Jessica had finally put down her phone and was staring at Sterling with undisguised interest. The lawyers waited with the patience of people being paid by the hour. Evelyn looked down at the contract in front of her. 12 months of her life sold for $5 million. 12 months of pretending to be someone's girlfriend. 12 months of whatever Nathaniel Sterling wanted from her. And at the end, freedom. A fresh start. Enough money to help Mrs. Lilly, to get her own apartment, to maybe finally begin the life she'd been dreaming of since she was 10 years old. When her mother told her she could be anything, she picked up the pen. I'll hold you to your word, she said, meeting Sterling's eyes one last time before she signed. About the physical intimacy, about everything. I'm not a thing to be bought. I know, he said again. That's what I'm counting on. She signed, and somewhere in the universe, the gears of fate began to turn. The apartment was everything Evelyn had never had and never asked for. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a kitchen with appliances she didn't recognize, and a coffee maker that probably had its own Wi-Fi connection. Crown moldings, hardwood floors, a walk-in closet bigger than her basement room. This is too much, she said when Sterling. She couldn't think of him as Nathaniel yet. Couldn't close the distance that his real name implied, showed her the space. You need an address that fits the story we're telling. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her reaction with that same searching expression she remembered from the bakery. People will expect my girlfriend to live a certain way. I'm not your girlfriend. I'm your contract employee. In public, you're my girlfriend. And in public, appearances matter. He moved to the window, looking out at the park below. The first event is next week, a charity gala for the Children's Hospital. My stylist will bring options for you to choose from. I don't need a stylist. I have clothes. You have a navy blue dress that you've probably worn to every important occasion for the past 3 years. He said it without judgment, just stating a fact. I'm not trying to change who you are, Evelyn. I'm trying to give you the tools to survive the world you're about to enter. Evelyn wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. The world of charity galas and society events wasn't the same as the bakery counter. Different rules, different armor. One thing, she said, non-negotiable. I keep working at Golden Lily every morning. I'm not giving that up. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. You want to keep working at a bakery while living in a penthouse on the Upper East Side? I want to keep the one thing in my life that's actually mine. He studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I'll have a car ready for you at 4:30 every morning. I don't need a car. The subway works fine. The subway takes 45 minutes. A car takes 15. More time for baking. He almost smiled. Consider it a job perk. The first month was exactly as awkward as Evelyn had expected. She attended 3 events with Sterling. Each one was a masterclass in performative wealth. Champagne that cost more per bottle than her weekly grocery budget. Conversations about summer homes in the Hamptons and winter trips to Aspen. Women in gowns that could have paid off her father's supposed debt twice over. Looking at Evelyn with barely concealed curiosity about who she was and what she was doing on Nathaniel Sterling's arm. At the third event, a gallery opening in Chelsea, a woman in a red Valentino dress cornered Evelyn near the champagne table. So, you're the mysterious girlfriend. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. I must say you're not what we expected. What did you expect? Someone more polished. Someone from our world. The woman's gaze swept over Evelyn's simple black dress, not the designer options the stylist had offered, but her own choice. Elegant but clearly not couture. Nathaniel usually dates models, actresses, women with portfolios, if you know what I mean. I don't actually. Investment portfolios, trust funds, net worth. The woman laughed, a sharp sound like breaking glass. But you, nobody knows anything about you. No family money, no social media presence, no connections. It's almost like you appeared out of nowhere. Evelyn felt her face flush, but she kept her voice steady. Maybe that's what makes me interesting. Interesting? The woman's eyes narrowed. Or convenient. There are rumors, that you're some kind of arrangement, a business deal. Everyone's wondering what you're really getting out of this. The words hit close enough to the truth that Evelyn felt physically wounded. But before she could respond, a familiar voice came from behind her. She's getting my attention. Sterling appeared at Evelyn's side, his hand coming to rest on the small of her back. Which is more than I can say for this conversation. If you'll excuse us, Mrs. Davidson. He steered Evelyn away from the red-dressed woman, guiding her toward a quiet corner of the gallery. Are you okay? I'm fine. She wasn't. Her hands were shaking and she felt dangerously close to tears. I don't know how to do this. Pretend to be something I'm not. Smile while people pick me apart. You don't have to pretend to be anything. Sterling's voice was unexpectedly gentle. Be exactly who you are. That's what He stopped, seeming to catch himself. That's what you what? He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his gray-green eyes. That's what I wanted when I agreed to this arrangement. Someone real, someone who wouldn't perform for my wallet. I am performing. That's the whole point. We're both pretending. Are we? He held her gaze. Tell me something true, Evelyn. Something you wouldn't tell the woman in the red dress. Something you wouldn't tell anyone. The request caught her off guard. Why? Because I want to know the person behind the contract. The one who gives away towels and refuses tips and works at a bakery at 5 in the morning because it's the only thing that feels real. Evelyn hesitated. The smart thing would be to keep her walls up, maintain the professional distance, remember that this was a transaction and nothing more. But something in his expression, something vulnerable beneath the billionaire exterior, made her answer honestly. I'm terrified, she said quietly. Not of the parties or the dresses or the people who look at me like I'm an imposter. I'm terrified that when this year is over, I still won't know who I'm supposed to be, that I'll have the money and the freedom, and I'll just freeze because I've spent so long surviving that I forgot how to live. Sterling was quiet for a moment, then, when my mother was dying, she told me something. She said, the saddest thing isn't not knowing who you are. It's knowing exactly who you are and being too afraid to be that person. His voice roughened. I've spent 5 years being too afraid. 5 years hiding behind the company and the money and the endless work because it was easier than feeling anything. What changed? You gave me a towel. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. And for 30 seconds, I remembered what it felt like to be seen as a person instead of a bank account. I've been chasing that feeling ever since. They stood there in the corner of the gallery, surrounded by million-dollar artwork and people who would never understand this conversation. And Evelyn felt something shift inside her chest, something that felt dangerously like connection. "We should get back," she said finally. "People will talk." "Let them talk." But he offered his arm, and she took it. And when they walked back into the crowd, Evelyn noticed that the whispers didn't sting quite as much as before. The months passed, winter melted into spring, spring warmed into early summer. Evelyn kept working at Golden Lily every morning. The car Sterling had promised waiting outside her building at 4:30 a.m. sharp, driven by a man named Marcus who never asked questions and always had coffee waiting. She attended events with Sterling, learning to navigate the social waters, developing her own quiet kind of armor. And somewhere along the way, the awkwardness began to fade. The turning point came at the most unexpected moment. It was the 4th month of their arrangement, and Nathaniel had invited Evelyn to a family gathering at the Sterling estate in the Hamptons. "My Aunt Victoria will be there," he warned as the car wound through the manicured streets. "She's difficult. She's been trying to marry me off to her daughter Caroline for years, and she won't be happy to see you." "Should I be worried?" "Victoria is all bark." He paused. "Well, mostly bark. Just don't let her intimidate you." The Sterling estate was everything Evelyn had imagined and feared. A sprawling mansion overlooking the ocean, filled with people who looked at her like she was an interesting specimen in a zoo. Victoria Sterling was a tall, silver-haired woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, and she made no effort to hide her disapproval. "So you're the mysterious girlfriend," Victoria said when they were introduced, looking Evelyn up and down with undisguised assessment. "I must say you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more polished. Someone from our world." Victoria's smile was thin as a knife blade. "Tell me, dear, what exactly do you do besides being Nathaniel's plus one?" Evelyn felt a familiar burn of shame in her chest, but something had changed in the past 4 months. She'd spent too many nights on the balcony with Nathaniel, sharing stories and vulnerabilities, to feel small anymore. "I'm a baker," she said calmly, "at a shop in Brooklyn called Golden Lily. I've worked there for 6 years." "A baker?" Victoria's eyebrows rose. "How quaint." "I also wake up at 4 in the morning. I can frost 200 cupcakes in under an hour, and I know 27 different ways to make a cinnamon roll." Evelyn smiled sweetly. "But if you'd prefer to talk about something more polished, I read 3 books a week, and I'm teaching myself Italian." "What do you do, Mrs. Sterling, besides hosting parties?" The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn felt Nathaniel's hand find hers, squeezing gently. "I think I'll get us some drinks," Victoria said stiffly and walked away. "That," Nathaniel murmured in Evelyn's ear, "was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." "She asked me a question. I answered it." "You eviscerated her with a smile. There's a difference." He was looking at her with something new in his eyes. Not just attraction, but respect, admiration. "Where did you learn to do that?" 15 years of living with Miranda taught me how to hold my ground without raising my voice. The only power bullies really have is the power you give them." Evelyn shrugged. "I decided a long time ago that I was done giving." Later that evening, when most of the guests had retired to the parlor for brandy and gossip, Evelyn found herself alone in the kitchen. She'd slipped away, overwhelmed by the social performance, and discovered the catering staff struggling with a dessert emergency. The soufflés had collapsed. The pastry chef was in tears, and the kitchen was in chaos. Without thinking, Evelyn rolled up her sleeves. "Do you have eggs?" she asked the nearest cook. "Flour? Sugar? I need a mixer and a clean bowl." 20 minutes later, when Victoria Sterling swept into the kitchen to demand an explanation for the delay, she found Evelyn Chen, the baker from Brooklyn, directing the staff like a general while somehow simultaneously piping perfect rosettes onto a tray of chocolate tarts. "What is going on here?" "Emergency baking," Evelyn said without looking up. "Your pastry chef had a crisis and I stepped in. The tarts will be ready in 10 minutes. I also made a backup batch of madeleines in case anyone wants something lighter." Victoria stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, Victoria Sterling didn't do warmth, but something like grudging acknowledgement. "The rosettes are crooked," she said finally. "They're rustic, it's a style." Victoria's lips twitched. Almost, but not quite, a smile. "Carry on, Miss Chen." She swept out of the kitchen without another word. Nathaniel found Evelyn an hour later standing on the back terrace, watching the moonlight play across the ocean. Her hands still smelled like chocolate and vanilla. "You know what Caroline told me tonight?" he said, coming to stand beside her. "What?" "She said you're the first person she's ever seen handle her mother without crying. Apparently there was an heiress 3 years ago who actually had a breakdown in the powder room." Evelyn laughed despite herself. "I've survived worse than Victoria Sterling." "I know." He turned to face her, and in the moonlight his expression was serious. "Evelyn, I need to tell you something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not. Or maybe it is, I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she'd come to recognize. "Tonight, watching you in that kitchen, you weren't performing. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just being yourself, brilliant and capable and completely unafraid of what anyone thought. And I realized what? That I've been falling in love with you since the day you gave me that towel. And tonight I finished falling." The words hung in the salt-tinged air. Evelyn felt her heart stuttering in her chest. "Nathaniel, you don't have to. I know this is complicated. I know there's a contract and a timeline and 100 reasons why this is insane, but I needed you to know." He took her hands in his. "I love you, Evelyn Chen. Not the arrangement, not the girlfriend for cameras you. The woman who bakes in my aunt's kitchen and reads 3 books a week and carries her mother's love inscription on her hand." Evelyn looked at this man, this billionaire who had seen her at her lowest and her most real, and made a decision. "I love you too," she said, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because the last time I trusted someone completely, he signed a contract to sell me." Her voice wavered. "I don't know how to do this, how to believe that something good is real and not just waiting to be taken away." "Then let me prove it." Nathaniel lifted her hands to his lips. "Every day, for as long as it takes, let me show you that this is real." She kissed him then, under the Hampton stars with the ocean sighing below them and the taste of chocolate still on her lips. And for the first time in 15 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't something that would be taken away. Maybe it was something she'd earned. It started with the small things. Sterling showing up at the bakery one rainy afternoon, just passing by, and staying for 2 hours to help Evelyn frost cupcakes for a children's birthday order. Evelyn finding books on his nightstand about small business management and entrepreneurship. Research for an investment, he claimed. But she noticed the pages were dog-eared at chapters about opening bakeries. Late-night conversations on the balcony of her apartment, sharing stories about their mothers, about loss, about the strange alchemy of grief and resilience. One night, a month after the Hamptons incident, Nathaniel arrived at the bakery just before closing. It was raining again. The universe, it seemed, was determined to make rain their thing, and he was carrying a worn leather journal. "This was my mother's," he said, setting it on the counter between them. "She kept it during her last year. I've never shown it to anyone." Evelyn's hands stilled on the dough she'd been shaping. "Why are you showing me?" "Because you trusted me with your mother's ring, the most important thing you own." He pushed the journal toward her. "I want you to know who she was, who I was before. Before all of this." He gestured vaguely at himself. The expensive watch, the tailored coat, the weight of a billion-dollar empire. That night, Evelyn read Eleanor Sterling's journal from cover to cover. It was filled with small observations, the way light fell through hospital windows, memories of Nathaniel as a child, recipes she wanted to try if she got better. And on the last page, written in a shaky hand, a final entry. "My son will forget how to be soft. The world will teach him that money equals safety and vulnerability equals weakness. But I hope, I pray that somewhere along the way, he finds someone who reminds him that the best parts of life can't be bought. That love is the only investment that matters." If you're reading this, Nate, know that I saw who you really are. Not the businessman, not the billionaire. The boy who used to bring me wild flowers from the garden and cry when the news showed sad stories about animals. That boy is still in there. Find someone who sees him too. All my love forever, Mom. Evelyn closed the journal with tears streaming down her face. She knew, she said when Nathaniel came to pick it up the next morning. She knew exactly who you were. She knew who you were supposed to be. His voice was rough. I've spent 5 years forgetting, building walls, becoming exactly what she was afraid I'd become. No, Evelyn took his hand. She said the boy was still in there. She was right. How do you know? Because I've seen him. Every time you show up at the bakery in the rain, Every time you listen to Mrs. Lily's stories, even though you have 100 more important things to do, every time you look at me like I'm something precious instead of something purchased. She touched his face gently. Eleanor knew, and now I know too. It was the first time she'd seen Nathaniel cry. The trip to Napa Valley came at the 6-month mark, disguised as a business obligation. There's a vineyard I'm considering investing in, Nathaniel explained as they boarded the private jet. But really, I just wanted to get away with you, away from the cameras and the contracts and all the reasons we're supposed to be pretending. Are we still pretending? He looked at her, and there was nothing guarded in his expression. I stopped pretending months ago. Napa in early summer was golden. Endless rows of vines stretching toward mountains that turned purple at sunset. Air that smelled like earth and possibility. They stayed in a small cottage on the vineyard property, far from the main house where other guests mingled and networked. On their second evening, Nathaniel drove them to a hill overlooking the valley. They sat in the grass as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber. Tell me something you've never told anyone, he said. Evelyn thought for a moment. When my mother was dying, she asked me to sing to her. This old folk song her grandmother taught her about a woman waiting for her love to come home from the sea. I sang it every day for the last 3 weeks of her life. She paused. I haven't sung it since she died. I was afraid that if I did, it would somehow dilute it, make the memory less sacred. Will you sing it for me? Why? Because I want to know all of you, even the parts you've been protecting. So Evelyn sang. Her voice was soft and imperfect, cracking on the high notes, but the melody floated across the golden hills like a prayer. When she finished, she realized her face was wet with tears. That was beautiful, Nathaniel said quietly. It's the first time I've sung it in 18 years. I'm honored. He was quiet for a moment. I need to tell you something. What? I knew who you were before the contract, before the bakery even. I've been looking for you for longer than you know. Evelyn's heart stuttered. What do you mean? 3 years ago, I started something I called the towel test. Whenever I traveled, I'd go to random shops, cafes, bakeries, small stores, dressed like an ordinary person. I wanted to see how people treated me when they didn't know I was worth billions. Most people didn't notice me at all. Some were rude, some were indifferent. He turned to look at her. But that day in Brooklyn, you saw me. You saw that I was cold and wet and struggling, and you gave me something without being asked, without expecting anything in return. It was just a towel. It was everything. His voice cracked. My mother always said I'd know when I found the right person. She said it would feel like coming home after a long journey. And when you handed me that towel and refused my tip because you thought I needed the money, I knew. Daham gostum. Even then, even before I knew your name. Then why the contract? Why didn't you just... Because I needed to be sure. I needed to know that you'd still be you even when you found out who I was. That you wouldn't change. That everything real about you wouldn't disappear the moment you discovered my net worth. He took her hands. And you didn't. You're still the woman who gets up at 4 in the morning to bake bread because it makes you feel close to your mother. You're still the woman who refuses tips from strangers. You're still you. I love you, Evelyn said, and the words felt like coming home. I love you too. He leaned forward and kissed her, slow, deep, unhurried. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. Let's forget the contract. Forget the arrangement. Stay with me because you want to, because this is real. It's real, she whispered. It's the realest thing I've ever known. They returned to New York different. The contract still existed on paper, but it had become irrelevant, a formality neither of them thought about anymore. They were simply two people in love, navigating the challenges of their vastly different worlds together. But happiness, Evelyn had learned, was a temporary condition, and there were people who couldn't stand to see her have it. She should have known it wouldn't last. In her experience, happiness was a temporary condition, a brief respite before the universe remembered to crush her. But the weeks after that night on the balcony had been so golden, so unexpectedly perfect, that she'd let herself forget. She and Nathaniel had agreed to keep their relationship private, not because they were ashamed, but because they wanted something that belonged just to them, away from the contracts and the public appearances and the expectations of Sterling Industries' board of directors. To the outside world, they were still the billionaire and his mysterious girlfriend performing for cameras at charity galas. In private, they were two people learning to love each other in the quiet hours between obligations. Mrs. Lilly knew, of course. Nothing got past her sharp eyes. "That man," she said one morning as Evelyn kneaded bread dough with a dreamy expression, "he makes you smile like your mother used to. Real smiles, not the ones you've been practicing for 15 years. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been watching." Mrs. Lilly patted Evelyn's flour-dusted cheek. "Be careful, my girl. Love is beautiful, but it also makes us vulnerable. And there are people in your life who would use that against you." Evelyn should have listened more carefully. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Evelyn was at the apartment. She'd started thinking of it as home, which was dangerous, when her cell rang with an unfamiliar number. "Miss Chen," a woman's voice, unfamiliar and coldly professional. "This is Victoria Sterling. I believe we need to have a conversation about my nephew." Victoria Sterling. Evelyn had heard the name at various events. Nathaniel's aunt, his late mother's sister, who had designs on merging her branch of the family with his through an advantageous marriage. She'd been pushing her daughter, a cold-eyed blonde named Caroline, at Nathaniel for years. "How did you get this number? I have many resources, including some that paint a rather unflattering picture of your arrangement with Nathaniel." Evelyn's blood went cold. "I don't know what you mean. Don't insult my intelligence. I know about the contract. I know about the $5 million. And I know that whatever fairy tale you've been telling yourself, my nephew is not going to marry a girl who was literally sold to him by her own family." Victoria's voice dripped with contempt. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end this charade. You're going to disappear quietly before you embarrass yourself and him any further. And in return, I won't release the information I have to the press." "What information?" "Documentation of your family's financial dealings, the terms of your contract with Sterling Industries, and some particularly illuminating text messages between your stepmother and your stepsister, discussing exactly how they manipulated you into this situation." Victoria paused for effect. Imagine how that would look in the tabloids. "Billionaire's girlfriend exposed as purchased companion." Your little bakery would be ruined by the scandal. Mrs. Chen would lose everything. The threat landed exactly as intended. Evelyn's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "You would destroy an innocent woman's business just to get rid of me. I would do whatever is necessary to protect my family's interests. Nathaniel deserves better than a gold-digging nobody who wormed her way into his life through a business transaction." "I'm not—" "Spare me the protests. I've seen your type before. Pretty face, sad story, convenient access to wealth. You're nothing special, Miss Chen. You're a transaction, and transactions end." The line went dead. Evelyn stood frozen in the middle of the apartment, her whole body trembling. She thought about calling Nathaniel, telling him everything, letting him handle it. But Victoria's words echoed in her head. Imagine how that would look in the tabloids. Your little bakery would be ruined. Mrs. Lilly, the one person who had believed in her unconditionally, the one thing she couldn't risk losing. She was still standing there 20 minutes later when her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Jessica. "Bet you thought you were so smart. Guess what? Miranda's been in touch with Aunt Victoria. We're going to destroy you, Evelyn, and there's nothing you can do about it." 3 days later, Evelyn found the social media account. It appeared on Instagram first, then Twitter, then the society blogs that track New York's wealthy elite. An account claiming to be hers, posting photos she didn't recognize, making statements she'd never made. "So grateful to my amazing boyfriend for the Hermes bag. Billionaire life upgrades. Can't believe I used to work at a bakery. Lol. That life is so behind me now. Ladies, the secret to landing a rich man: play innocent. Works every time." The posts were accompanied by photos of designer goods, screenshots of shopping sprees, images of Evelyn at various events, with captions suggesting she was using Nathaniel for his money. The account had thousands of followers within hours, and the comments ranged from mocking to vicious. Evelyn felt sick as she scrolled through the posts. This was Miranda and Jessica's work. She recognized their particular brand of cruelty, but the execution was professional, polished. Someone with resources had helped them create this. Victoria Sterling. She wanted to call Nathaniel, to explain, to show him what was happening, but what would she say? "Your aunt is working with my evil stepmother to destroy me." It sounded paranoid. It sounded like the excuse of a gold digger caught in a lie. Before she could decide, the door to the apartment opened. Nathaniel walked in, his face pale, his phone clutched in his hand. "Tell me this isn't real," he said, holding up the screen to show the fake Instagram account. "Tell me you didn't write this." "I didn't." Evelyn's voice cracked. "Nathaniel, that's not me." "That's—" "My aunt called this morning." His voice was hollow. "She sent me screenshots, messages, documentation of your contract that somehow ended up in her hands. She says you've been playing me from the beginning, that your family has set this whole thing up as a long-term con." "That's not true." "Then explain this." He swiped to another image, a text conversation apparently between Evelyn and Miranda, discussing how much longer until we can access his real money. Evelyn stared at the screen. "That's fabricated. I never sent those messages. Miranda must have—" "Miranda says you've been coordinating with her the whole time, that the basement sob story was an act to make me sympathize with you, that you and Jessica and your stepmother have been planning this for months." The betrayal of it, not just the lies, but that he was listening to them, hit Evelyn like a physical blow. "You believe her?" Evelyn's voice shook. "You believe Victoria and Miranda over me?" "I don't know what to believe." The words burst out of him, raw with pain. "I've spent 5 years learning not to trust anyone. 5 years watching people pretend to care about me when they only wanted access to my wallet. And then you came along and I thought—" He stopped, pressing a hand to his forehead. "I thought you were different." "I am different." "Then why do you have $5 million from our contract sitting in an account I can trace? Why is your stepmother telling me you have been in contact the whole time? Why does everything about this feel like I'm the idiot who fell for a perfectly executed scheme?" Evelyn felt something break inside her, not anger. She was too shocked for anger, something deeper, something that felt like the last threads of hope snapping. She walked to the nightstand where she kept her mother's ring and carefully removed it from her finger. The silver was warm from her skin, the inscription invisible but still there. "Your worth is not defined by what others think of you." She set it on the table between them. "That's the most valuable thing I own," she said, her voice steady even though her heart was shattering. "My mother gave it to me when she was dying. It's the only thing I have left of her. I'm leaving it with you." Nathaniel stared at the ring. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving, because I will not stay in a place where I'm not trusted, not anymore." She picked up her coat, her purse, the bag she'd packed that morning, when some instinct told her this moment was coming. "When you figure out the truth, and you will, because you're smarter than this, you can give it back to me. Until then, I don't want to see you." "Evelyn, don't—" She held up a hand, and he stopped. "I spent 15 years being treated like a liar by my stepmother, being told that my feelings weren't real, my memories weren't accurate, my worth was negotiable. I will not accept that from you." She walked to the door. "I loved you," she said, not turning around. "I loved you before I knew who you were, and I loved you even more when I found out. But love isn't enough if you don't trust me. Goodbye, Nathaniel." She closed the door behind her and walked to the elevator with her head held high. She didn't cry until she was on the subway, surrounded by strangers who didn't look at her twice, heading toward the only place that had ever felt like home. Mrs. Lilly didn't ask questions when Evelyn showed up at the bakery at 10 o'clock at night, eyes swollen, carrying everything she owned in a single suitcase. She simply opened the door, led Evelyn to the small room above the shop that had once been storage, and said, "This is yours now, for as long as you need it. I can pay rent." "Hush," Mrs. Lilly pressed a cup of tea into Evelyn's hands. "Tonight you drink this and you sleep. Tomorrow we bake. Everything else can wait." Evelyn slept for the first time in 3 days. The next morning, Mrs. Lilly found Evelyn already in the kitchen at 4 a.m., kneading bread dough like she was trying to punish it. "You're going to overwork that dough," Mrs. Lilly said gently, coming to stand beside her. "I know." Evelyn didn't stop. "I just need to keep my hands busy. If I stop moving, I start thinking. And if I start thinking, you'll fall apart." Evelyn's hands stilled. "How did you know?" Mrs. Lilly took her by the shoulders and turned her so they were facing each other. "Because I've been where you are. 30 years ago when my husband left me for another woman. When everyone told me I was foolish to believe he loved me. When I had nothing but this bakery and a broken heart." She cupped Evelyn's face in her flour-dusted hands. "You know what saved me?" "What?" "The same thing that will save you, waking up every day and making something beautiful. Choosing to create instead of destroy. letting the rhythm of work remind you that you are more than what was done to you. Mrs. Lilly smiled. Eventually, the heartache fades, not disappears, fades. It becomes part of the texture of your life instead of the whole story. Evelyn broke down in the older woman's arms, sobbing like she hadn't allowed herself to sob since the night she left the apartment. He didn't trust me, she choked out. When it mattered most, he believed them instead of me. Then he made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Mrs. Lilly stepped back and picked up a rolling pin. The question is whether you will let that mistake define the rest of your story. I don't know how to do anything else. Then let me show you. Mrs. Lilly smiled. We have 300 croissants to make for a catering order this weekend, and I'm going to teach you a new technique for laminated dough. After that, we'll discuss what comes next. The work helped. It always did. And by the end of that first week, Evelyn had begun to remember who she was before Nathaniel Sterling and who she wanted to become after. The weeks that followed were a kind of purgatory. Evelyn threw herself into work, arriving before dawn and staying after dark, losing herself in the meditative rhythm of dough and sugar and heat. She didn't check social media. She didn't answer calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She existed in a bubble of flour and cinnamon and the safety of Mrs. Lilly's watchful presence. The fake Instagram account continued to post, but Evelyn refused to look at it. Let them say whatever they wanted. She knew the truth, and eventually others would too. What she didn't expect was the knock on the bakery door 2 weeks later. It was nearly 9 o'clock in the evening, long past closing time. Evelyn was alone in the shop doing inventory when she heard the sound. She considered ignoring it, probably just a lost tourist or a drunk looking for late-night food. But something made her walk to the front. Through the glass, she saw Nathaniel Sterling. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in jeans and that same gray hoodie from the day they met, and he looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. In his hand was her mother's ring. Evelyn considered not opening the door. She had every right to leave him standing there in the dark. But she remembered what her mother always said about facing things head on. So she unlocked the door and stepped aside to let him in. I found the truth, he said without preamble. His voice was cracked at the edges. I hired investigators, real ones, not whatever yes men my aunt usually uses. I found everything. Everything. The fake account was traced to an IP address connected to your stepsister. The text messages were fabricated using editing software. The financial documents were doctored. Someone altered timestamps and account numbers to make it look like you'd been coordinating with Miranda. He paused. And I found out that the $5 million debt your family claimed, it never existed. Miranda invented it to pressure you into the contract. Your father's business was fine. The whole thing was a con, but you were the victim, not me. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. So now you believe me. I believed you before I had proof. His voice broke. That's what I came to say. I believed you the moment you walked out the door, but I was too proud and too scared to admit I'd been wrong. I let fear win. I let my aunt and your stepmother poison me against the one person who had ever loved me without conditions. That sounds very nice, Evelyn's tone was flat. But you also accused me of being a gold digger in front of my face. You made me defend myself against lies. You didn't trust me when it mattered most. I know. Tears were streaming down his face now, and he made no move to wipe them away. I know, and I'm sorry, and I understand if you never forgive me. But I couldn't let you spend another day thinking you were alone, that nobody believed you, that nobody would fight for you. He held out the ring. I don't want to give this back, he said. I want to add to it. I want to spend the rest of my life earning the right to be part of this ring story, part of your mother's legacy, part of everything that made you who you are. But that's not my choice to make. It's yours. Evelyn looked at the ring, then at the man holding it. She thought about her mother's words inscribed on the inside of that worn silver band. Your worth is not defined by what others think of you. I'm opening my own bakery, she said. Nathaniel blinked. What? The $5 million, the real money, not the fabricated debt. I'm using it to open my own bakery. Rose's Bakery after my mother. Mrs. Lilly is going to be my partner. She watched his face for a reaction. I made this decision without you. I'm building this without you, and I needed to prove to myself that I could. Of course you can. He smiled through his tears. You're the most capable person I've ever met. That's not what I'm asking. She stepped closer, looking up into his red-rimmed eyes. I'm asking if you can love me like this, not as the woman you rescued, or the contract you signed, or the poor girl from the basement. As someone who has her own dreams, her own plans, her own life that doesn't revolve around you. Yes, the word came out instantly, no hesitation. God, yes, Evelyn. I don't want someone who revolves around me. I want someone who challenges me and surprises me and makes me work to be worthy of her. I want to be your partner, not your savior. I want to stand beside you while you build your empire of cinnamon rolls and tell everyone I know that the most amazing woman in New York chose to let me be part of her story. A tiny crack appeared in Evelyn's armor. That's a very nice speech. I've been practicing it for 2 weeks. He almost smiled, then sobered. I also want you to know something else. Victoria is being removed from the family trust. Jessica's fake social media accounts have been reported and deleted. And Miranda, he paused. The investigators found evidence of financial fraud going back years. She's been embezzling from your father's business accounts. The police are involved. Evelyn felt the ground shift beneath her feet. And Harold, he's cooperating. He gave a statement confirming that Miranda pressured him into the contract, that you were coerced, that none of this was your choice. Nathaniel's voice gentled. He asked me to tell you he's sorry. He knows it's not enough, but he wanted you to know. It would never be enough, but it was something. The ring, Evelyn said finally. Give it to me. He placed it carefully in her palm. She looked at the familiar silver, the worn edges, the inscription she knew by heart. Then she slipped it onto her finger. This doesn't mean everything is fixed, she said. This doesn't mean I forgive you completely. You hurt me, Nathaniel. Even if you believed me afterward, you doubted me first. That left marks. I know, but I'm willing to let you try to earn back my trust, slowly on my terms. She looked at him steadily, starting with showing up at the bakery's opening day as a customer. Not as my boyfriend, as a customer. He nodded, something like hope flickering in his eyes. I can do that. Good. She walked to the door and held it open. Now go home and sleep. You look terrible. I love you. I know. A small smile tugged at her lips. Good night, Nathaniel. As she watched him walk away into the Brooklyn night, she felt something settle inside her. Not resolution, that would take time, but peace, the beginning of peace. Her mother's ring gleamed on her finger. She had work to do. Rose's Bakery opened on a Tuesday in September, exactly 1 year after Evelyn had signed the contract that was supposed to define her. The storefront was small but beautiful, painted in soft rose gold and cream, with her mother's name hand-lettered on the window and a display case full of cinnamon rolls that Mrs. Lilly declared were finally better than mine, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. The opening day line wrapped around the block. Nathaniel came as promised. He stood in line for 45 minutes, ordered a coffee and a cinnamon roll, paid exactly the listed price, and sat in the corner reading a newspaper until closing time. He didn't ask for special treatment. He didn't announce who he was. He was just another customer in a gray hoodie, watching the woman he loved build something beautiful. It took 6 more months before Evelyn officially let him call himself her boyfriend again. Miranda and Jessica's reckoning came swiftly. The fraud investigation revealed years of embezzlement, fabricated expenses, and stolen funds. Miranda was arrested on a Thursday morning. Perp walked out of the house she'd thought was rightfully hers. Jessica tried to flee to Miami, but the account she'd been relying on had already been frozen. They ended up in a rundown apartment in Newark, selling off designer handbags to make rent, watching their former social circle pretend they'd never existed. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 1 year after the bakery opened, Evelyn drove back to the old neighborhood. She wasn't sure why, curiosity maybe, or closure. She found Miranda and Jessica standing outside their apartment building, arguing with a man posting a foreclosure notice on the door. They saw her at the same moment, Evelyn stepping out of Nathaniel's Rolls-Royce, wearing a simple dress and her mother's ring and an expression of complete calm. Jessica started toward her, face twisted with rage. This is your fault. Everything that happened to us is the consequence of your own choices, Evelyn finished. I didn't fabricate evidence. I didn't embezzle money. I didn't sell anyone to a stranger for profit. You did, both of you. We were trying to save the family, Miranda hissed. You were trying to save yourselves. The family was just the excuse. Evelyn looked at them, really looked, for what might be the last time, and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not vengeance, just distance, like looking at strangers through a window. I'm not here to gloat. I just wanted to see you one more time and tell you something. What? Miranda laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. You forgive us? After everything we did? Not for your sake, Evelyn said, for mine. She touched her mother's ring. Carrying anger takes energy. I'd rather spend it on people who deserve it. My husband, my business, my family. You're not worth the wait anymore. She got back in the car without waiting for a response. As they drove away, she didn't look back. The wedding was small, held at a vineyard in Napa Valley, the same vineyard where Nathaniel had first kissed her, where she'd first admitted she was falling in love. Mrs. Lilly made the cake herself, insisting it was her gift. Marcus served as best man. Harold came, tentative and tearful, and Evelyn let him walk her down the aisle because forgiveness, she'd learned, wasn't about what people deserved. It was about what she chose to give. When Nathaniel lifted her veil, his eyes were full of the same wonder she'd seen on that rainy day in Brooklyn, when she was just a girl in an apron, and he was just a man who needed to get warm. I love you, he said, not because you're beautiful or brave or any of the things I should say, because you're you, because you showed me what real is. I love you too. She smiled, tears streaming down her face. Now stop talking and kiss me. He did. 2 years later, Evelyn stood in front of Rose's Bakery, now a chain of 5 locations across New York, holding her daughter in her arms. The baby had her father's gray-green eyes and her mother's honey-brown hair, and she was named Eleanor Rose Sterling, after 2 women who had never met, but whose legacies were woven together in the silver ring on Evelyn's finger. Your grandmother would have loved you, Evelyn whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. She would have taught you to bake and told you that your worth isn't defined by what others think of you. But I'm going to teach you something different. Eleanor gurgled, tiny fingers wrapping around Evelyn's thumb. I'm going to teach you that your worth isn't defined by anyone at all. Not others' thoughts, not others' actions, not even the worst things that happen to you. Your worth just is. It exists because you exist. And no one, no stepmother, no contract, no amount of money can ever take that away. Nathaniel appeared beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. What are you telling her? Secrets. Evelyn leaned into him. Mother-daughter secrets. Should I be worried? Terrified, she grinned. She's going to be absolutely unstoppable. He kissed her temple. Like mother, like daughter. Above them, the sign for Rose's Bakery gleamed in the morning light. Inside, Mrs. Lilly was teaching a new batch of young bakers the secret to the perfect cinnamon roll. And somewhere in a rundown apartment in Newark, 2 women were learning what it meant to have everything and lose it all. But Evelyn wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about the girl who used to wake up at 4 in the morning in a basement room, dreaming of something better. She was thinking about the woman who'd built that something better with her own 2 hands. She was thinking about how the best stories aren't the ones where everything goes right from the beginning. They're the ones where the hero falls down, gets back up, and builds a life worth living anyway. She was thinking about home, and she was finally, blessedly there. Thank you so much for staying until the very end of Evelyn's journey. Your support means the world to us. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales of love, resilience, and triumph every single day. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a moment. See you in the next.